Welcome back in, everybody. This is Dave with the Believe podcast. I think we are on episode 8 right now, I believe. I believe that we are on episode 8 on the Believe podcast. I have to get this one out there. I have to this is one of those episodes where it's top of mind because I just went through all this stuff today and I was like, all right, this is going to make a great episode. So let's just sit down. Shake the shoulders off and try to decompress on this one. It could be very therapeutic for me to kind of get this one off my chest. So this episode is all about when times get tough. And just by the title of the episode, you probably know what I mean. And before I dive into it, again, at the top and at the bottom of each episode, I'll remind you guys, please drop some comments if you're listening over on YouTube or Spotify for any of the episodes that I've released so far. Let me hear your thoughts on anything and everything. Doesn't have to be related to the episode itself. Just let me get your thoughts on different things. You know, this one's all about when times get tough. So I'm sure everybody listening, all 5 of you, I don't know, hopefully more, will have an opinion on this one and will have personal anecdotes on this one. So please drop them in the comments. But let's dive right into the episode right about now. So you probably can guess by the episode again what this means. Every now and then we've got those tough days. Every now and then we have those instances where things just don't seem to go right. And it could happen at the start of your day. It could happen a little bit later on in the day, maybe like midday, but it tends to snowball, right? Things tend to start off either okay or not so great, and then just progressively get worse throughout the day. And there are varying degrees of what you can have as and or classify as bad days, but let me just tell you about how my day went as I'm recording this episode. So, actually, before that, no, I'll wait until after. So, top of mind today, this is what I went through. So, I have a decently long commute to work. I'm considered a hybrid employee, so I have to be in a certain number of days throughout the week. As I'm recording this, it's a shortened week. We're just coming off of MLK Day. So, actually, I think this is going to be the next episode that publishes, so pretty cool that it's going to be releasing very shortly after recording this. But anyway, traveling into work today, have a decent commute, have a decently long ride. I get about 2/3 of the way to my office to get into work. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, all the lights shine on my dashboard. And, you hear that ping. You see the check engine light comes on. If you've got a somewhat newer vehicle with the eyesight stuff, it'll say eyesight is off. You'll see a bunch of other lights that come on, like I don't even know what the other ones are. Like I think my parking light was on even though it wasn't in park. I was driving on the highway. I was I think I was in the fast lane, which is just one in from the carpool lane, driving solo, and all of a sudden it just lit up like Christmas, right? Like a Christmas tree. Dashboard starts going off, and literally no other issues ever before with my car. Okay, I actually consider myself pretty religious when it comes to my car maintenance here too. Not to use the religious connotation there, but I keep on top of that stuff. Now, a little bit more of a background. I've got a little bit under 70,000 miles on my car, so she's getting up there. The old Betsy's getting up there in mileage. And but I've done regular maintenance on it all along the way. So regular oil changes, tire rotations, front and rear differential, brake pads, you name it. I've got the standard stuff handled. I don't go overboard and I don't get swindled with a bunch of different stuff, but just kind of like painting the background picture for you guys. So everything up until this point was fine and dandy. Never had anything go wrong with the vehicle. I've had my own, instances here and there of like different scuffs and scratches and whatnot. Because it's a lower vehicle and I live in the mountains and it tends to bottom out, blah, 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 blah. This is all extraneous detail that you don't necessarily need to know. But I'm not necessarily saying that I actually do have a perfect driving record. I'm not going to lie on that one. So no accidents, knock on wood for that. But other scuff marks, minor things like that have happened before. So that's the whole background picture for you. Probably more detail than you need to know. But anyway, circling back around, literally car going from nothing actually wrong, nothing ever was wrong with it. Internally, as far as like any other hiccups or issues, and then all of a sudden out of the blue, driving in the fast lane, lights light up, and then what else happens after that point? I get no gas. So I'm trying to hit the gas pedal, I'm getting nothing off of it. Luckily, I was able to get all the way over. I probably had a chance to get over to the left side of the highway and pull over on that side, but I decide, even though I don't have any gas, let me try to get over all the way to the right. So I had to get over probably about at least 3 lanes to get off, and luckily, we might circle this back around to, the higher powers that be, right, looking over you in certain instances, as luck or fate would have it here. I was right near an exit at the time, so I got off on an exit, and I'm again, I live in the SoCal region, California. I was near the North Hollywood area, and there just happened to be an exit. I was able to also get off at that exit. Get off, there's a little bit of an off ramp that goes downhill, and again, still don't have any gas, so I'm not able to speed up to any kind of speed. This is all deceleration doing this. And to get off on the exit, there's a light at the end of the exit. I come basically I came to a complete and full stop, and the engine starts knocking. I start feeling it kind of like shaking a little bit. So obviously, I'm shaking up, and kind of freaking out. You get into like a mini shock, emotionally. And I'm at the base of this exit ramp at a light. It was a red light. And knowing that I don't have any gas, kind of freaking out a little bit. Cars start piling up behind me. I decided to like turn the car off because I'm like, well, maybe if I try to reset it real quick, it might come alive or something like that. Maybe I'll get the gas pedal back. So I do that. Nothing really changes on the dash or anything. The momentary cutoff of the engine didn't miraculously fix anything. But I was still able to coast. So what I ended up doing after that point was just pulling off to the side real quick. There was a little bit of a cutout. So I was able to kind of like turn the vehicle to the right and coast it's not really like in neutral, but you know what I mean. Like if you're just coasting on a vehicle. So it's a gas vehicle, luckily too. It wasn't electric. Otherwise I would have probably been at a full stop and not able to move it at all. So I pulled over momentarily and sort of got out of the way. Like it wasn't really like the best stop, part to stop or best location to stop at. And immediately throw on the hazards. And was thinking, oh man, I'm gonna have to like stick it out right here. Again, not the best area to call out for help. It wasn't necessarily like dangerous, but I think there was another on ramp that was just ahead of me there too. So it was kind of an awkward position to be in. But anyway, had the hazards on, called the wife, explained the situation real quick. She did her best to try and calm me down. I was like, all right, I guess I gotta call a tow and try to get it to the dealership because it's not gonna like fix on its own. I'm not gonna be able to like get myself and get the car in its current condition to any kind of help. So I was like, all right, explain the situation to her. I was about to like look up getting help. I have AAA, so I have like a towing service that I pay an annual fee for. So I was like, all right, I guess I'll do that next. But it was still kind of like top of mind where I was like, this probably isn't the best place for me to stop. So what I ended up doing after I jumped off the call with my wife was I just tried to turn the car off again, try to turn it on again, try to do the whole, blow into the cartridge of the Nintendo, the original Nintendo console, right? To see if it'll kick over and give me something. Still wasn't really doing much. I think I did get a little bit of gas at that point, but the engine was still kind of knocking. I could hear it and feel it kind of rumbling, but I decided to try and go up a little bit further. Even if I was coasting and even if I had my hazards on, I was going to just try to stay to the right a little bit and get over. So I was able to get a little bit further up the street, but it was still kind of like a main street off of like an exit, and was able to pull the car over into a no parking zone in front of like this apartment building. And I was thinking like, all right, this is okay. If I end up getting, stuck here, I could at least stay with my vehicle and kind of figure it out. But it still wasn't the best spot, right? So, and this is, I mean, honestly, at this point, I probably went like 2, 3 steps beyond what I should have done off the highway. I probably should have just pulled over on the highway and called it a day. But was trying to do a little bit extra to get the car to a decent spot in case I was stuck there for a little bit longer period of time. So I'm now parked in front of this apartment complex in a no parking zone, sort of like a loading zone. Wasn't really like a bus lane. I wasn't blocking any kind of like driveway entrance or anything like that, but it clearly had a sign that said no parking. So I just happened to like look around, try to see what was around me at that point. I looked to my left, and there was this little side street that led further down into what appeared to be a more quiet neighborhood. And I was like, oh man, that side street is really nice if I can get over there. So I tried to turn the car over again. It turned on each time, so I was lucky on that. And, this was a somewhat busy street that I was kind of off of, and I had to kind of do like this. I couldn't do like a legal left turn. I had to kind of like do a little bit of a U-E to kind of come back off of this side street. And it was maybe, I think at least 3 or 4 lanes in order to do that. So I was kind of freaking out about that too. I was like, oh man, I don't want to get stuck in like the middle of the street here either, but let me chance it because this other spot across the street was perfect. By the way, this is probably not something that you should do. You shouldn't follow my advice or follow my story and what I tried to do, because there was probably multiple instances here that I shouldn't have chanced, but I did anyway. But by some grace of God here, I was able to get across the street, get to that side street, and was able to kind of like park the car on this, residential-ish area off of that main street, just off the main street. But I guess what I'm saying for this part here is that I felt a lot better about getting to that point because it made me a lot more relaxed. I wasn't in like a dangerous zone. I wasn't in a sketchy zone. I wasn't like just off the highway with cars going like 70 plus. I wasn't in, just off of an exit that got to another on-ramp. I wasn't parked in a no parking zone where I'd have to explain to some cop or somebody else who might have said something about it. I was in a legal, parking area that I could just feel a lot more comfortable with, and that actually calmed me down quite a lot. So once I got to that spot, I was like, okay, this is it. I can finally like relax and feel a little bit more comfortable here. Rolled down the windows a little bit, and it's, here in SoCal, you'd think it'd be just a little bit cooler, but we're still in that area of where I was still like low 70s, but it was actually kind of a perfect day. Wasn't too hot. It wasn't like it was the dead of summer and it was 90 degrees and I was sweating buckets, but ended up rolling the windows down a little bit, taking a deep breath, and calling up AAA. And actually, I didn't even have to call them up. With technology nowadays, it's kind of crazy. They have a QR code on the card. I scanned that. I went through a chat bot and punched in all my details. Didn't even have to call anybody. They pulled up my account like right away. I didn't have to even like sign in or anything, and said, yeah, this is where I'm at. This is my exact address. This is my make and model of my car. Need assistance, need a tow. This is the issue. All the engine lights came on. I don't think the car is drivable. And then you plug in where you want to go. And actually, to take a step back, before I hit up AAA, I wanted to see where I wanted to take my car. And again, I don't know if somebody's looking out for me here on this faith-based podcast, but the dealership that I normally go to is somewhat near where I work. And it used to be where I have another address. So I have an apartment somewhere else that I used to live before moving in with my wife. And I still have it for the time being. I'm going to probably get rid of it soon. But it and just to give you the background on that, it's kind of, the dealership is kind of close to that address, and where it was in North Hollywood wasn't that far. It was about 30 miles to get to this dealership. So I was like, wow, like, I think I have like 200 miles for a tow in my current service with AAA, and I was like, all right, this is kind of perfect. So let me hit up the tow truck. So I did have to wait a little bit for the tow truck. It was about 40 minutes, and guy came, super nice and everything, loaded me up, and I'm like, all right, here we go. I didn't literally rub my hands together, but I was like, all right, we're on our way. I can relax and everything. I can be good. And again, to take a step back, I called the dealership. I said, hey, can I drop it on by? This is what happened to my car. Can I swing by and drop it off? They're like, yeah, no problem. I'm gonna set a time for you and try to make it in that time frame or close to it. But if not, you're all good. And all this stuff made me feel better. So I was like, okay, sounds good. So tow truck comes. We're loaded up, ready to go. We're looking at maybe a half hour, 40-minute drive. And we're turning around. We're trying to go through the town there, trying to hop back on the highway. And there's this one sharp turn that we turn off of this one street onto another. And the tow truck driver ends up bumping into the curb, and wouldn't you know it, pops a tire. So he's got I don't know what your standard your standard tow truck, right? It wasn't like a huge one, and it had four main I wouldn't say wheels, but like two axles. It wasn't like a 3-axle kind of thing, and two main tires in the front, and then he had two sets of 2 tires on each back portion of the axle, right on the left and right side. So a total of 4 tires in the back and then 2 in the front. And he ended up popping one of the tires on the outside of the passenger side rear tire. I think he also nicked the wheel well as well. So wouldn't you know it, in a snowball kind of fashion, this ended up this bad day ended up snowballing into a worse day. So he has to call off to the side. He calls off to his local dispatch, and turns out we may have been able to drive real slowly, even if it was on the highway, to our final destination. But he wanted to play it safe. There was a yard nearby that he had from dispatch or whatever, and decided to go to that. Now this is further out of the way of our destination, deeper into town, but somewhat close by, maybe like a 10-minute drive from there. So we get out from there. He was able to change the tire relatively quickly, maybe like another 20 minutes or so, maybe a half hour. And then after that point, we're like, okay, let's load up. Let's try it again, second attempt at getting to the dealership to offload the car here. And another mini setback, he actually ended up running low on gas. So we had to go, once again, a little bit out of our way to let the guy fill up his tank. So got us off track by probably another 10 minutes or so before we finally got on our way, and no other hiccups along the way from there. Got to the dealership, ended up chatting with the guy a little bit. Again, great guy. And finally make it to the dealership, offload it. And again, I'm still shaking up. My mind's racing too, especially when the check engine light comes on. If you've been there before, or if you've been in a similar situation, especially on a highway or somewhere that's not home or near home, right? You start freaking out quite a bit, and everything's racing through my mind too, of like, all right, how much is this going to cost me, and what's the bill going to be, and blah, 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 blah. Turns out I already have an answer for it. Turns out that I think it was something to do with the thermal intake of the vehicle, and ended up being covered under warranty, whatever the part is. Now, I don't know. I still don't have any details as to when I'm going to get the part in or how quick of a fix it's going to be. Turns out I also needed brakes, and there's One other thing for like rodent control too, because I live in the mountains most of the time, so there's some evidence of that, and I've been putting that off for a while. So I'm like, all right, let me do that. So it turns out I was going to bring it in for brakes anyway, and this just kind of happened, kind of set it off. But anyway, they gave me a loaner vehicle right away, so I didn't have to wait in the dealership. And and looking back on all of it, and finally getting back to somewhat of a comfortable state and spot. So looking back on the day, going like, wow, it could have been so much worse than how it turned out. And in fact, again, looking at the kind of day that I had and where I broke down, I had excellent cell service, was able to reach out to help. It came in a decent time frame, even though we had the hiccup with the pop tires, able to get out there. I didn't have to spend a lot of time at the dealership when we got there. I have a loaner vehicle and was able to breathe a sigh of relief, especially after figuring out that I didn't have to have a super hefty bill outside of something that I was already, thinking about paying anyway. It ended up being a little bit more expensive, but not like detrimentally expensive like I was fearing it was going to be. So this episode isn't really to talk about your worst fears realized, but it is, all of that whole story that I just had to unload there. So thank you for sticking with me to this point. All of that was to say that things can get worse, and a lot of times they do. But if you're looking about it and you're looking back on it in retrospect, it could always be worse. It can always be more difficult, or things could have always gone a lot more horrifically than they did. And all things considered, I'm thinking about my story here, and looking back on it, like it felt a lot worse than it ended up being. I mean, it always feels worse when you're in it and you're going through it and you're all emotional. And then when you look back on it, you're like, well, I'm still safe, or, everybody's still safe, everybody is okay, and that's what's most important. I have another slight anecdote here. Late last year, winding back the clock to late 2025, getting around the holidays, gearing up. We had already spent a lot of money throughout the year on, we went on an anniversary trip, me and my wife, and that's, in November, so getting into the December months and Christmas and getting all the gifts and blah, 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 blah. So needless to say, end of the calendar year, funds are pretty tight for a lot of folks, including ourselves. And what ended up happening? Hot water heater went out. So, just when funds are tight and, you're just trying to get through the end of the year, something else comes up. And if you're a homeowner, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Stuff blows up and falls apart and is an issue, right when you least expect it. Come to find out, too, we have, this is sort of like the rainy/snowy season. We usually get snow up in the mountains, but it's mostly just rain in the entire area here. It's technically considered like a coastal desert area in Southern California, but this is like the quote-unquote rainy season. And we ended up getting right around Christmas and the Christmas break about 2 weeks straight of just like a deluge of rain. And, spent money on a hot water heater. Going through all of this rain right now, find out that we've got a leak in our roof. Now, this is something that I had seen before in our house, and I thought that a new roof was going to fix it. Ended up getting a new roof a little bit over a year ago now, and I thought that would fix it. But there's this one spot in our master bedroom that still seems to bubble up. It's like it's a very slow drip kind of leak, and this bubble just started growing, and I was like, oh, man. What else can go wrong? What else can happen? So, giving you all these personal anecdotes, there could be other things too that can crop up. Like in a less extreme example, something as simple as you wake up, you stub your toe. Maybe you go over to do something else, you nick your finger, right? Or if you're a dude and you're shaving, maybe you nick yourself shaving. And, again, maybe something else happened. Maybe you pop a tire in your car and you got to change the tire. And, the day just seems to go from bad to worse. So what do you do on those snowball kind of days? Another example could be, maybe you just had a newborn and you lost your job in this crazy job market and world of AI that we're in nowadays. It's a very real fear that a lot of people have these days. A lot of people losing jobs, not a lot of jobs to be had, not a lot of new jobs to be had nowadays. So these are things that happen. These are real world fears and stuff that a lot of people are facing nowadays. And this is the point in the episode where I'm going to turn it more towards our faith here and try to give you some advice on what to do. And I'm not perfect in this arena either, especially when I was calling up my wife earlier today, probably, with a freaked out tone in my voice and having her trying to calm me down. But it's times like these where your faith can definitely be tested. And I like to think of a quote from a band that I used to have more admiration and liked more until a recent child out of wedlock story kind of came about that nobody seemed to care about because it just seems to be like, well, that's rock and roll kind of thing. But there's a quote from one of the songs from the Foo Fighters that always seems to be top of mind in instances like these. And I've had multiple instances, it seems, lately within the last decade or so of my life where this is highly applicable. So here is your pop culture reference for today. And it's from their song. I think the song is entitled Times Like These. And this quote from the song always goes through my mind whenever I'm thinking about situations like this. And it goes something like this: it's times like these, time and time again. And that's just a very small quote, from one of their songs. But it's just so poignant. It's just something that I constantly think of whenever I'm going through a hardship in life, where it's just, it kind of reminds me of what can go wrong and what can happen. But it's also a reminder of life is super tough. Life is not easy. Life is a hardship and a struggle a lot of times. And there are a lot of times where you also have to put it into perspective and think about the silver linings. Think about how much you can be grateful for and think about how much goes right compared to what a lot of other people have to deal with in their lives. If you have a job, if you got food on the table, if you got a roof over your head, if you got a spouse, if you got loved ones, if you got a family, you're rich in a lot of ways that a lot of people aren't. So there's a lot to be thankful for. But I just like that quote because it's always a reminder, it's times like these, time and time again. It's just this can happen and it can snowball and it can kind of get off the rails. But how do we rein it in? And to me, the way I like to look at it is you have a choice, and a lot of times and daily, right? We have choices every single day. You can choose to take one path or the other. And in particular, in instances like this, what you can choose to do is you can choose to be positive or negative. You can choose to blame the higher power or lean into that higher power. And here I'm talking about religion, so it's God, right? For a source of guidance and a source to help you out. So it's these times where you're truly tested and you really have a choice, as with all things in life. And again, like I said, you can choose to react positively or negatively. And I really believe that it's more of the evil side, the dark side that's in everybody else, in everybody, period, where you can choose to react out of emotion. I think the dark side of you chooses to just react almost instantaneously to those emotions. And what do you feel? What's the emotion that you feel when you get into instances like this? It could be rage. It could be anger. Maybe even hatred. You could have the urge to throw or punch something or scream or talk rudely to people. Knowing the kind of day that I had, I could have just had this sour puss face on the entire time and just had this rude or negative attitude, talking to the tow truck driver, or talking to the dealership, and pointing the blame and pointing the finger at everybody else but myself. But I chose not to do that, thankfully, and I think that's for the best. But it's especially bad if you're trying to point, that negative attitude towards the people that you love, right? If I had called up my wife and was just starting, swearing and cursing and all this other kind of stuff, it's just, there's no good that comes out of it, is what I'm trying to get to. Like, there's no point in reacting in those moments, but we're all human, and that's what we tend to do. It's super easy. Here's another pop culture reference to reference Star Wars here, right? Like, to go to the dark side is to react to your emotions, to give into those emotions and those snap decisions without trying to calm yourself down, without trying to think things through, and without trying to take a moment to really just take a deep breath, decompress, and try to think your way out of the situation. Again, we're all human. We're all, pretty much everybody in that personal, anecdote that I had just given is probably going to react the same way, where you're freaking out. You're like, oh crap, like, oh man, I can't believe this happened. And especially if you needed to be somewhere, you had to be on time, or there was, an important function or event that you needed to be to, and or that you needed to be at. It's very easy. What I'm trying to say here is very easy for you to just lean into those immediate emotions of, man, I can't believe this happened and this sucks, and and trying to be negative about it. But what I've also realized is, in the past, when I've tried to, or not tried to, but when I've leaned into those immediate emotions and those reactive moments, I've found out that it will most likely get worse for you if you do that. If you lean into that, or if you invest into those negative emotions, especially when you're in the moment, in those like panicky kind of moments, it's not going to work out well for you. 9 times out of 10, taking the extra moment to try to figure things out and slow things down will make it a lot better for you. Except for maybe in those rare instances where you have to act quickly, and hopefully you react quickly enough to have some sort of positive outcome in that moment. But I think a lot of times, if you're able to, like I was today, even though I was like searching for that kind of like quote unquote perfect spot to pull over to, what it enabled me to do once I got there was to really just calm myself down and go like, all right, it's going to be fine. It's going to be okay. We're going to think through this. And, even though my day didn't go exactly as I had planned, it actually derailed by quite a lot. I was able to kind of rein it in and pull it in at the end of the day. All of that is to say, too, and again, roping it back around to, our faith here and our religion, it's the same thing with God, and it's the same thing with trying to look at how different things play out in your life in relation to what your beliefs are and what your faith is. There's a lot of connections here, is what I'm trying to say, between what goes on in our daily life and how we can relate that back to the faith. It's the same thing here. It could have been very easy for me to point the finger at God, or point the finger, at our faith and going like, why did you let this happen to me? And not just my instance of today, but like there's so many other things that, when things go bad or not the way that you want them to, it's very easy. What I'm trying to say here is very easy to like point the finger and say that it's somebody else's fault, trying to do the blame game, especially to a higher power, and just trying to find somebody to blame isn't always the best route to take. And like I said, I was trying to find the silver linings in today too, and pulling it back around to that. A lot of times you have to think, and again, with faith, you have to kind of look at not only silver linings, but you have to like look beyond the obvious. And it's the same thing here too. For me, I was looking at it going like, I had no gas. I was on a highway. I could have gotten into an accident. Somebody could have rear-ended me. Something bad could have happened there, but it didn't. I was able to get over multiple lanes, get off on an exit, stop not once, twice, but like three times to get to a spot that I needed to get to. Any number of things could have happened in between that spot, even though geographically I had gone probably not even a mile. But a lot of things could have went wrong, but they didn't. And even though I was waiting for 40 minutes, it was a really nice day. So I got out a little bit, was able to find a little bit of a little bit of shade through this one tree kind of thing. And it really wasn't that bad. I wasn't, sweating like crazy. I had some, I had a drink. I had a little, a couple snacks with me. So I was totally fine. I had a full charge on my phone. So, could have been worse there too. It could have been, in some place where I didn't have cell service, some place that was super seedy in like a really rundown area somewhere where I didn't feel safe. Any number of things could have went wrong. Any number of things could have went bad, but they didn't. And even though there was another setback of popping the tire on the tow truck, we got back on course. That could have went wrong too. And anything could go wrong. Something could have snapped when he was trying to load up my car or whatever. Any number of things could have went wrong, but they didn't. And even in thinking that, all these horrible scenarios of what it was going to cost me and everything, I was running through thinking like, oh man, like I really don't need this right now. Just went through, the end of last year with the hot water heater. Now I'm looking at trying to fix this leak in my roof and everything. Like, I don't need these expenses right now. This is like too much to handle right now. And what ended up happening ended up being a part that was covered under my warranty. So I was thinking it was going to be thousands of dollars, some major engine, failure or fix. And even though it's getting up there in mileage and I'm thinking about selling it soon, like, oh man, I'm going to have to dump more money into this car, even though I'm looking to dump it soon and, do a trade-in or get a new vehicle. I don't need to be spending thousands of dollars on this right now. So all of these scenarios go through your head, and it wound up not being really that much of an issue. At least I don't think so. Like I haven't got it fixed yet, so I really need to get a final verdict on this. But so far, it seems like it wasn't a nothing burger, but and it wasn't. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't a horrible day because it was pretty crappy. Like it wasn't an ideal day. But what I'm saying here is that you have to look at the silver linings. You have to look at how much worse it could have been and be thankful for the things that went right, even though things go wrong. In so many situations and so often, you can look at all of these situations and things that go wrong and looking at how they snowball and blah, 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 blah. And you have a tendency, a lot of people, a lot of times have a tendency, including myself, have a tendency to only look at and focus on the negative and what didn't go right. And thinking that, like, hey, I'm going along my day, la-di-da-di-da, and this is the norm, and this is what I usually go through. And it's very easy when something like this happens to go, man, like, this went wrong, and then this went wrong, and nothing went right, blah, 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 blah. And at the end of the day, if you really like replay all the events in your mind, look back on everything, you really can pick apart things that really went right. Yeah, like no doubt about it, this was a bad situation that I was in. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't ideal. I was on my way to work. I had to call out the rest of the day to work. And it stunk. It's not, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It was a bad day. But it could have been so much worse than it had been. I'm going to give you another quick anecdote here before I leave you, and I might bring this up in the future, but I just want to talk about this as well because it's kind of on topic. I have another personal anecdote for you. I was in college. I was driving my first vehicle still. I was in an '01 Honda Civic. I went to school in Connecticut. It was the winter time. And I was living off campus. I was driving back from campus to my off-campus housing. It was dark out. It wasn't super late. It was maybe just after dinner time. Driving back, and it was super cold out, and it had rained earlier that day, and then it got cold enough where it turned to ice. And if you ever drove on black ice, you know how serious it is. I should have known this as soon as I had gotten out, that the roads were not going to be in the best situation or in the best shape. So the house wasn't super far from where I live. Where I lived off campus wasn't super far from campus. So driving back from campus, had a couple of streets on suburban streets, and there was this one turn that was a little bit sharper than most. Ended up taking that turn way too fast. Was going like 40 when I should have been going like maybe 25. Rushing. I was a kid. I should have known better. Should have known because I had realized, or recognized those situations before. So I had known what I was kind of up against, and it just didn't click in my mind to slow down around this one turn. Ended up spinning out, twisting my front axle on my Civic, and spinning out the car. I did literally, I think it was probably like not a 720. What's in between 720 and 3.6, like a 540 or something. Car had spun all the way around. It was a right-hand turn. The car had spun all the way around, and they tell you to turn into the spin instead of away from it. But again, you're panicking in the moment. I ended up turning the wrong way against the turn, spun all the way around, and then around basically again, and wound up backing up the car off of the street on the opposite side of the street, on the left-hand side of the street, and basically went in rear end first. Now, same thing, looking at the silver linings of what had ended up happening there as well. There were houses all around, right? This is a suburban area, houses basically on a standard grid, except for, and you guessed it, except for on this one turn. And I gotta believe here, some sort of grace of God here, I ended up backing my car off of the road. There was no curb right there, went off a little bit, and my car was angled because it was backed up, and I think it was a little bit of a decline at that point. But I got out and looked around my car, and I kid you not, I literally spun off in between 3 other trees. And if I had gone in a little bit further, if I had gone off to the side, I could have been in a much more serious situation, or I had a lot more damage to my car and or myself had I hit one of those trees, but I didn't. And it's times like those where my faith is actually heightened to new levels. Because I look at that, you got to look up to the heavens at that point and go, thank you, God. Like, this is, it's unreal. Like, you look at that stuff and you really start to believe, like, there's got to be a guardian angel or somebody somewhere out there looking out for me. Because you get into those types of scenarios where you're looking at the odds going like, what are the odds that I would have wound up this way, and how much worse it could have been. And you have to think in those moments, wow, this is, there's a higher power looking out for me here. Anyway, I might touch base on that story a little bit in the future too. There's a little bit more to it as far as like the fixes and stuff goes, but that's basically the gist of it. But I think I'm going to wrap this one up here. Kind of crazy. Definitely topical, top of mind. Had to get this one off my chest because it literally just happened today. So I thought I'd share it with you. Thought it was a good topic to talk about. But again, I want to hear from you guys. What happens when times get tough? What happens in your lives when the day starts off bad and it just seems to get worse? I want to hear all about it, especially if you have a connection to your faith or religion, or how it kind of tied in, like me with, spinning off the side of the road and my mini miracle over in college. Like, have you come across any kind of situation like that, or have any stories of other people in your lives that have had something similar or something even more crazy happen to them? Where it could have gone worse and it didn't, and their faith was tested and they came out on top of that one. I really want to hear your stories on this one, because I know there's a lot of crazy stuff that happens every single day. in this type of topic. So please let me know all about it on YouTube and Spotify. Thanks for listening this week. Not sure if I'm going to head on over into the commandments. I think I have another episode that I'm going to record right after this one for the following week for you guys. So yeah, let me give you the teaser on that one. It's going to be about what I'm going to entitle Fine Lines. And what that means in regards to one thing in particular. I think there's a lot of times where we're walking this tightrope and this fine line of when does one thing become another. And I'll kind of leave it at that. It's a little bit ambiguous, but it's this idea of, to kind of sum it up and paint a little clearer picture, it's this idea of not putting yourself above other people, not thinking yourself above other people, and how difficult that is to grapple with at times. So that's a little teaser for the next episode. Again, thanks so much for listening to this one. Drop your comments, and I will talk to you on the next one.